I think there's a couple of subplots. Obviously, everyone's going to try to focus on Carson versus Trump, given the reversal of some of the polls that we've seen over the last week or so. And then I think maybe the other subplot, if you look at what's happening with Jeb Bush, it's almost eerily the exact timing of what we saw with Scott Walker. The stories heading into the last debate of Walker slashing budget. Consultants are not happy with where things are going, that he's going to have to narrow his focus and cut organization, and that he really needs this debate to be kind of a Hail Mary pass. All those conversations that were had about Scott Walker before the last debate is exactly what people are saying about Jeb Bush right now. So I think those are a couple of subplots to look for, and I think a third one is obviously Ted Cruz has built, in my view, the only viable conservative movement candidacy at this point. But I think the question he still has to answer is, can he be a standard bearer? Can he be somebody that if the movement finally decides to rally behind him, can he convince the movement that if he were to be the nominee, he could actually win over Americans to our side? So I think those are three things that I'm looking for tonight.
So, of course, you're very plugged into the evangelical movement in Iowa, and Carson, of course, has taken Iowa really in the country by storm, but probably Iowa in particular. Talk about what you think his long-term prospects in Iowa are. I mean, does Cruz or Rubio have a realistic shot of kind of removing him from the top spot in the Iowa caucuses?
Well, you could see last November I emceed an event that our big evangelical organization, the Family Leader, had, and he was the keynote speaker, and I got a chance to spend pretty much the entire day with him. And we had like 1,100 people show up, which for one candidate in an off year is a huge crowd in a small state like Iowa. And so you could sort of see there he was beginning to build connections with people. He's had that Run, Ben, Run pack, which of course has had some critics, well-deserved as well, but they've been really cultivating the state for the last couple of years and handed him a full 99-county organization as a candidate from day one once he announced. I think right now there are only two campaigns in Iowa who have an organization that if the caucuses were tomorrow could actually mobilize enough voters to win. Carson is one of them, Cruz is the other. Organizationally, they are way ahead of everybody else. And I know Donald Trump is drawing crowds, but listen, if Donald Trump showed up in Burlington, Iowa to hawk the bedazzler, 5,000 people would show up because it's Donald freaking Trump. All right, I know he got 2,500 people in Sioux City last night, but it's the same thing. I mean, I love Sioux City. Some of my good friends live there, but it's not like there's a rip-roaring good time to be had on a Tuesday night in Sioux City, Iowa. So, I mean, what else is there to do other than to go see Donald Trump? What we don't know is how many of these people that show up at these rallies are actually registered to vote, have voted in caucuses before. And I think that's something that RedState viewers should pay attention to, because a caucus is not the same as a primary. A lot of times it's a 2 to 3 hour on a school night excursion. And that's why usually the more principled candidates, both for Republicans and Democrats, do better, because you have to be really committed as an activist to give that kind of a time. It's not just show up and vote on my smoke break or lunch break like a primary. So we'll see if Trump can actually mobilize onlookers and gawkers and admirers into voters. I think Ben Carson's way ahead of him where that is concerned. And I think Cruz has become the darling of the activist class in Iowa. And I think when it's all said and done, the two most likely candidates to win about 95 days from now are Ben Carson or Ted Cruz.
So, last question. Last two election cycles, of course, we had to deal with the numerous stories about how the evangelical voters in Iowa and so forth would deal with Mitt Romney and his Mormon religion, which I think was a kind of an overblown story. Trump seems to be picking up a lot of that same kind of playbook by bringing up the fact that Carson is a Seventh-day Adventist. What, if any, effect do you think that will have in the long term as that kind of information filters into the voters' consciousness?
Well, I would challenge somebody to ask Donald Trump if he knows what a Seventh-day Adventist is. I'm not sure he does. But in this case, this is a more complicated question than the Mormon question. Because there are different branches of Seventh-day Adventism. They've had their own splinters. There are some aspects of evangelical Christianity, particularly Pentecostal denominations, that would have some teachings very much in line with Seventh-day Adventist in some case, and then there would be others say Baptist, for example, that would have a lot more issues with it. So I think this is a far more nuanced and complicated question than the Mormon one ever was with Romney. And I really think it's going to come down, in this case, to Ben's character himself. His ability to articulate what he believes in and to stay consistent with that, I think Ben's improved tremendously where that's concerned the last few months. I have a lot of doubts about the people on his national team. About a month ago, his national spokesperson, Doug Watts, gave an interview to Politico on the abortion issue, and I have to tell you, I've seen better messaging from pro-aborts on the abortion issue than what Doug Watts, his campaign spokesman, gave in that Politico piece. So I really think in this case, it's not going to be a macro issue, his Seventh-day Adventism. I think it's going to be how is he able to show people that he can actually live out his faith consistently and identify those values with Iowa caucus voters.